for the best recording. So, okay, so yeah, so when we hear the word syntax, what we are talking about is that this is something that has to do with language. So when you have a language, there's always a certain syntax that you use. And if you don't use that appropriately, then we say you are making an error. And the English we speak every day. Sometimes when somebody will always say you have fired a bullet, when you used to laugh at people in school when they make errors in the English grammar or English language. So similarly, Java being a language has a certain syntax. So we want to begin looking at those syntax, because without that, if you start writing your programs, you are going to start having errors as you move on. So we make sure that we understand what the syntax is, and then we can keep to those recommendations or those recommended syntax. Okay, so the last time we ended with our source code. And remember we said when you write your code in Java, we call it source code, and it's just plain language or plain English. And then when you save the file, and then the Java compiler will convert this into bytecode. So the source code and bytecode. And then the bytecode, and the Java machine will run that and then produce your results. So what we will be working on is source code. We don't need to worry about the bytecode because we can't even read it. We don't even need to see it, because once it is compiled and there's no error, then you have no problem with the source code. So we're just working with source code, and Java is doing the rest. Now, Java is also providing us with a whole lot of other things that can help us to get the programs to run the way it is. So you can just always write 1 or 2 lines of code, and Java will do a whole lot of things and respond to what you want to do. And so it has simplified so many things already. And that's why we say Java is a high-level programming language, because some of the things, now, of course, computers only understand zeros and ones. So it means if you really want to write, like when computing started, you wanted to write a programming from scratch, you needed to specify everything, that every instruction that you want to give the computer, you have to specify. But now, we don't need to do that, because we have a system that will simply convert our source code that we write into that machine language. And so that's what we are going to look at when we talk of syntax. So I'll be switching between this and then the IDE. So the IDE, the Eclipse, if you downloaded Eclipse and you open it, this is what you get. And like we said, we normally start with projects. And so once you create a project, of course, you are always going to be working within your project. You can have 2 or 3 projects or whatever. So I have my projects here. To the top left, I have level 100, level 300, my church application, my church project, and all that, my Java classes, and so on. So all these are projects. And so assume I want to work on my Java classes today. So I'll just click on the down arrow, or I click on it to open that. And then I have only one package in there, which is afternoon. But maybe this is morning, so I want a morning package. So within my Java classes project, I can right click on it, and then so if I right click and I go to new, then I do package. And so this package is just a folder, so morning. And then I finish. Okay. So once I finish, you see the morning in there. And now because now this is the code I want to run. So if I go back to our PowerPoint, so this is the code. So I want to say public class welcome and all this. Now, the moment you start in the IDE, it gives you a whole lot of other things. So in my morning package or folder, I right click on it and I go to new, and then I say class. So remember we said project, package, and then class. So this class is what we want to create. So I'll write welcome. So welcome is the name of the class. We'll come to talk in details about that. I'll check this, which I'll explain later as we go on. And then I say finish. Now, when you do this, now you realize the IDE has created the class, and by default, it has just already done this for me. So we have package morning. Now, this is not really part of your program. It's just telling you that this is the folder that this file is in. And it doesn't change anything. You can decide to write your files without packages or without folders. They will run all the same. It's just that, you, the human being, you need to organize your work, and so you put them in packages. Now, it has written here, public class welcome. So you realize that we didn't do anything. All we said was that we were creating a class, and we gave it the name welcome. But what is happening here is Java, of course, and because the Java project, automatically it adds these things. So it means these things are very significant in Java. It has also added all this, which you call the main method. We'll come to that. And now it has given us some space here. It says auto-generated, whatever it is, and then we can type. So I can type in here. So if I go back to my screen, you see that we have, okay, so I can have display string and then system out. Let me end this so that I'll copy this one. So I just copy this, Control C, come back to my, and then I paste it here. So we see that the display string is there, and then system.out.println, we already covered this last week. So if I just say run, so now what's happening is you realize that if you look at the top there, these tabs, Java has created the file already, and it has called it welcome.java. So once you create the class, IDE automatically saves it. Like we said, Java files are normally saved as .java. And so when I go to run, so when I say run as an application. What it does is that it compiles into the bytecode, which we don't see. It saves it in the folder, and then it executes or it runs it, and then it prints out the hello world. So this is what we have instructed the program to do. Print this onto the screen. And so it has printed it out. Anything I add here is also going to print it out. So I say welcome to Java. And I go back and I run again. So I run as, then I get the thing all printed out, because that's the instruction I've given. So now what are these? This is what we're going to talk about next. They are not part of the application, or they are not part of the program. They are not executed. They are normally omitted. And these are what we call comments. And so the next thing we are going to look at, so the next thing about the Java syntax is commenting. And commenting is something that is always recommended in programming, because it helps you to understand what you are writing. Now, this is a very simple syntax, so you don't need to worry about explaining it. But sometimes you can be writing very complex code. So you need to add a comment and say that, you need to say that this I want to do this, and that's why, and that's why I'm writing this code. So sometimes you need to put the comments in there, and the comments help you the next time you look at the program, or another programmer can read your code and understand. Because if you are just going to be writing only plain code throughout, it can be very confusing, especially if you are not looking at it repeatedly. You leave it for some time and come back at another time. You realize that you will have that. So here, comments there are two ways. In Java, we're going to be using just two ways of making comments. The first one is what we call the line comment. So the line comment is the 2//, and then whatever follows that all the way to the end of the line is a line comment. And so when you write your application, you can put line comments. So in this case, So if I go back to my IDE, we realize that this is a line comment. Now, if you take this out, what you are telling the compiler is that this is supposed to be Java code that you want to run because it's not commented. And when you do that, Java will tell you that, or the IDE will tell you that there's an error because it doesn't understand what this is. This is not Java syntax. So you can put it as a comment, and so the compiler will simply ignore it. And so once it's ignoring it, you can type as many comments as you want. So I am writing my first Java program. Okay, so it's a comment. You can go on to okay. So I am teaching. Okay, I'm doing this to teach a class. Okay, so what is happening? All these are comments. They are all ignored. Now, the moment I comment on code like this, what I've done is that I have taken out everything. Now, you're not going to get an error because Java is waiting to see code. If you don't have code and you still run, so if I go and I run this, now it runs and there's nothing to display. Because so it has tried to display something, there's nothing because you have commented out everything. And so if I bring back, if I take out this comment and then I run, then I'll get my application running again so I can get back my hello, welcome to Java. So this is what we call a line comment. So for every line, you need a double slash. It has to be double. If you put one, that is going to be an error because Java doesn't understand that. And that's the syntax we're talking about. If you put 3, it doesn't make sense because already the 2 is saying that what follows is commented out or is ignored. So if you add another one, no, they all don't. It doesn't make sense because once Java sees the first 2, everything else is ignored. And so 3 or 4, they don't make sense. So the line comment is always just 1. Now, sometimes you might need to write more than 1 line of comment. And so you can continue doing // and so on. You can just write your whole paragraph as you want, but we'll now do what we call the multiple line comment. So the multiple line comment, that one starts. So in this case, I can remove all this. So these are comments. Now if I remove them, now you realize that there are so many errors that I highlighted there. But because it's a whole, all this is a comment. And what I'll do is I'll just put a slash followed by a star, and then I come to the end, put a star, and then close. And that is what we call a multiple line comment. So everything beginning and ending is a comment. And so it is totally ignored. So in this case, you can write as much as you want. Everything is going to be commented out. So we call this multiple line comment. So as long as you are within the opening and the closing, then it is a multiple. So if I run this, and you wouldn't. First of all, let me take this out so that when I run, so when I run this, run as application, now, because all this is commented out, it doesn't affect the program in any way. It's just, so it ignores all this and then comes to work on this one and it prints out, hello, welcome to Java. So this is called the multiple line comment. And look, notice how it is written. Sometimes people don't pay attention to this and then they end up making errors. It's supposed to be written so I can have something like this. So if I ask which of the following is a multiple line comment, I can have this and the star, and then end up with this, this and the star. Okay, so that's one. I can have this and the star. Okay, end up with this and the star. Okay, I can have maybe the star with this and then the star with that. So realize that there are several ways. And if you are not into programming or if you are not writing these things, you probably will not be able to. And then, so I can have a question like this. So if I ask which of the following represents a multiple line comment, Of course, we know a single line comment is just 2 forward slashes, but a multiple line comment, which of these represents a multiple line comment? Is it the top, the first, the second, the third, or the fourth? Can somebody unmute themselves and tell me if you are confident enough that you know the right answer?
The second.
Yeah, okay. Does somebody else have a different opinion as to whether?
Second one.
Yeah, okay. All right, that's fine. So we have the slash followed by the star, and then you end with the star followed by the slash. So what it means that if you make an error, so if I now put the star after this, then there's a whole lot of error here. So Java doesn't understand what this is. Of course, when it sees this, it's supposed to see it after it has seen this, but not, no, it should see this at the beginning and not at the end. So you open, we'll be coming across all those things. Anything you do in Java, when you open something before another, you always have to close that before the first one. So you open one followed by two, you need to close two before one. So even if it is 1, 2, 3, you have to close 3, 2, 1, and so on. So if you look at these braces that we open, we'll talk more about them. You see, I've opened one, I've opened two, and now I need to close the two and then close the one. And so each of them has, we'll talk of blocks shortly. So that is commenting in Java. So we can have multiple lines, or we can have single line comment. We don't need to worry about the document or the doc comment because that's used to print what we call Java doc in what we call Java doc documents. So I'll do it that way, but we are not going to worry about that. So we can have what we call multiple line or block comment. You can comment the entire block. So we now talk of what the class is. So a class is normally what everything we use in Java is contained in. So before you even begin to write a Java program, it will ask you for a class, or you'll be required to write a class or to create a class. So there's always, we can write other Java codes and other things without the class, but then if you want it to run as an application, you need a class. And the class is simply what we call a blueprint. We'll come to talk about objects. So it's within the class that we can create objects. So within the class, we define so many things. So I can have a class. So this one we said public class welcome. No, it doesn't matter. That's a name. No, if I want to write a program, yeah, somebody has a comment. Okay, all right, yeah. Yeah, so if I want to write a program about maybe a dog or my dog, I can say public class dog or public class my dog. So it's a name. Now within the class, you now have the ability to define so many things. You can create what we call objects. You can create what we call methods or functions, and so on and so on. But everything must be within the class. So what we're saying is that you cannot create a Java application. So let me, what is happening here? You cannot create a Java application, and then after you've ended, so this is the end of the class. And now we said, now all these braces, it doesn't matter. We only put them so that we can read. Java doesn't really care. You can put the two together or whatever. Now, if you've ended the class, so you can see that anytime I select the opening brace there, the corresponding closing one is also highlighted. So the IDE does that for us. So if I click on this, that's the corresponding closing. So this opens and that closes, this opens and that closes now. So the class, which is welcome, begins here and goes all the way and ends here. So everything that is within the opening and the closing is part of the class. Now, if you come outside the class and you try to type something, so system.out, now if you start doing this, now what's happening is that you are going to get an error because you have closed the class already. So anything that is coming out, that is beyond that, Java is not going to recognize it. So what we're saying is that you can create your class, open, and then they close. But then you are free to put as much as you want within this. Talk of the main method. You can type several lines of code that you want, but ensure that the code doesn't go outside the class. And that's why we say everything we do in Java must be within the class. So once you create your class, and luckily now the IDE automatically puts the opening and the closing for us. When we're learning these things, we're using those parts, and so you have to type. So you say public class welcome, you need to put the open and then make sure that you put the close, because if you don't do that, then you get an error. But now, the moment you create your class, then the IDE puts it in there for you. So what is within, we call the class body, or the body of the class, which is mostly the Java code. Now, when you write this public class welcome, what you are doing in Java is that you are defining a class called welcome. And so what it means is that you can define another class. So this class is called welcome. You can define another class, maybe goodbye. You can define another class, my school, my courses, whatever. It's a name you are giving to the class. And so the name is sort of called the identifier. So we're identifying the class. So in that case, you can create, of course, you can have the same name, the same class names within the same folder. It's just like when you're trying to save a file, on your computer, and that the name you are giving already exists. The system will not allow you. So in your Java application, the classes must be different, because the classes are actually the file names. So when you write welcome, the system will save it as welcome.java. Or if you are going to save it yourself, that's what you have to write, welcome.java. And it must be exactly as you spelled it. Java is case sensitive. And so you need to make sure that whatever you write as your class name is exactly what is saved as your, let me clean this, what is saved as your file name, because Java is looking for the class. So when you ask it to run, it's going to go to your file, and then it's going to look for the class. And the file name must be exactly the same as so welcome, and then it is saved as welcome.java. So you can give it, I can create another class. So if I go to the morning and I do right click and I say new and class, I can write anything. I can say maybe my first, now we'll talk of class names, Java program. Okay, first Java program. Okay, I select this. Let me finish. So I've created another class called my first Java program. And then the IDE has saved it as my first Java program.java. So I can come to, so these are now in tabs. So you can create as many classes as you want. The IDE will display them as tabs. And so you can't have two that have the same name. And so what it means is that you cannot have two files that have the same name. If I try to create another class called my first Java program, of course, I'm going to get an error because the file name is already in existence. So you can always create a class. You are free to give it any name you want, but there are some conventions that we have to follow. So that convention, the first is that the class name must always begin with an uppercase letter or an underscore. And so, because Java is case sensitive, you have to always be careful that the class name you give, if you are using uppercase and lowercase, you are mixing them, whatever, the starting character must be an uppercase or a capital letter or the underscore. We used to add a dollar sign too, but sometimes these days it's not being recommended. And so you can have an underscore and then a capital letter. Now it can only contain letters and numbers or digits, as well as the underscore. No spaces, no special characters like the pound, the dollar, those are not allowed. And then you cannot have what we call Java keywords as your class names. Keywords are words that are reserved in Java, and they are used by the program because they mean something. So if I open this website, we have a whole lot of words that we call Java keywords. And so that's it's even, yeah, okay. These are mostly, so we have abstract, I said, Boolean and all this, but we'll come across most of these. You know, continue, extend, you know, go to instance of, you see that there's public, there's, you know, so all these are reserved words or keywords. And Java, and they mean something in Java. So you cannot use it to name your class. Or maybe when we come to talk of variables, you cannot use them to name your variables because you get an error. Because when Java comes across the word package or the word private or public, it means something in the program or in Java. And so you cannot use them as your independent names. So naming, you need to follow a certain convention. So, and we call that, we call them keyword. Of course, you can't have true or false as your name. So we have an example here. So good class names. So we have employee. This is acceptable because it starts with a capital letter. And remember we said Java must always start with a capital letter. This one is also acceptable because once you are starting with a capital letter, it doesn't matter whatever follows. No, it can be have small or whatever. This starts with an underscore. And so, and like we said, the dollar is also accepted. So once it starts with an underscore, it's a good or an acceptable class name. This has a number in it, but then once it starts with a capital letter, then it's acceptable. So these are acceptable class names. Now, what is not acceptable is space. So when you put space, you're going to get an error. You know, so if I quickly go back to, so when you are starting your, or when you are naming your class, I don't know why this thing freezes when I'm trying to name my class, and I go back to my morning and I say right click, new and class, and then I give it an employee. All of a sudden, I mean, not all, what happens is that the IDE will just highlight that type name is not valid at the top there. So type the name and employee is not a valid identifier, so it's not an acceptable name. So we need to remove the space. So now once you have removed the space, it says, okay, create a new Java class. So we can go ahead, finish. And so we have an employee, and that is acceptable. No, we still have my first Java program. We still have this. So we have all our classes being arranged in tabs there. And so you can't have spaces. Where were we? Yeah. Yeah, you can't have space. You can't use the word class. So you can't say public class, because in the first place, class starts with a lowercase letter, which is not acceptable. And it also is what we call a keyword that I've just mentioned. It's a Java keyword. So Java will not allow you. Phone hash or phone number is not accepted because of the special character here. And then the last one too is not accepted because it shouldn't start with a number. To start with an uppercase letter or underscore. So you can also have questions as which of the following is an acceptable class name, or maybe which of the following is not an acceptable class name. It depends. So if you understand the convention, then you can indicate which an acceptable class name is and which is not. So let me clean this before I move on. Okay, so that's how we create classes, and then we give them names, making sure that the names follow the convention or the syntax that we are talking about. So did I end? Okay. All right. So here, so when we write public class welcome, so we're saying that the keyword class identifies welcome as a class. So it can be welcome is just the name you give, but the moment there's class before it, then it is identified as a class. It's just like saying school or no public school, what the sec or public school Achimota or public school that name, what follows it identifies that name as a school. I can equally say public lorry park, Achimota. Now that cannot be a class because now that cannot be a school because I wanted to identify them as schools. And so in Java, we also have classes. Once you have class, whatever name follows identifies it as a class. And then the word public is also another keyword in Java or reserved word. And we call it an access modifier. Access modifier in the sense that it modifies access to the class. So when we say public, of course, it's just the English word public. What it means is that it's accessible to every other person or to the public. As we say public toilet. Now, if you are walking around in town and you see a label public toilet, you just walk in. You don't need any permission. Or you go to the mall, it's public. Wherever, you can't do that in a private home or a private community because there's a gate which will not allow you, and that is private. But public, you can easily go in. The same thing in Java. Once we call a class public, then what it means is that everything I create within that class is accessible. And the way programming works is that you normally create separate files. And as the files are running, they connect to other classes, and then they pull information, or they can, and now Java being object-oriented, you can always access. Let's say I can just give you a simple example. I have two homes. I have Kofi's house, and then maybe John's house. So these are two independent homes. Now, in Kofi's house, maybe I have an object called Amma. So here, if I'm in John's house and I want to send Amma to do something, now my Amma is not in my house, so I can't just say Amma go. I need to go to Kofi's house. But if Kofi's house is not public, it means I can't do that. So what it means is that I can create functions or methods in one class, and then I can be working in another class and access those methods and then get them to do something. And that's exactly what we've done, even though Java it's simple here. When we go back to our welcome here, you will see that we have this system is a class. We'll come to talk in more details about it. So even though I'm in my welcome class, so this class is called welcome, I've gone to the system class and I've looked for an object in it. So we have objects that are created. So this is already created in Java. This is a class that is already in Java when you install it. And so I've simply gone to that class and I've asked it. So within that class, there's something defined as out, and then there's something defined as this. We'll talk about that. And then it tells everything about, or it gives instructions to the computer as to what to do. So even though I'm in my welcome class, I've gone to the system. So I'm in John's house, and I simply say, oh, Kofi's house, Amma, do something. We'll talk more about objects and methods. So if this system class were not public, no, I can't do this. So what it means that in Java, if you can open the Java folders and look through all the files, and there are thousands and thousands of them, you wouldn't dare do that. You would see a public class system somewhere. And then within that system, there are so many things that have been written, and it's public. And if it were not public, I can't do this. And so when you create your classes, it's always better to make them public, or Java recommends that you make them public. Of course, you can have private, or there is another one called default and other things. We'll talk about those ones later. But if it is not, so if this class were not public, what it means is that though it's not welcome, is not public, I can access others that are public, but no other class can access anything that is here, assuming that I created objects and other things. And so public is what we call an access modifier. We say it modifies access to the classes. We'll come to talk of methods, which are also public and other things. So when set to public, the given class is accessible to all other classes in the Java world, just like I've already said. So contents within the class are called the class body. So the opening and the closing. So the body contains all the code. Now, when we say that provides for the life cycle of the objects created from the class, so we're coming to talk of objects that are created within the class. There are things that are called constructors that are used to create objects. There are declarations of fields, variables, and all those things. We'll talk about them. And then what we call methods. So in Java, functions are called methods because methods are the actions or the things that are to be done. And so when you see print or print ln, those are methods. And we'll talk more about those ones shortly. So a class can contain any number of, you can write as long as you want. Computers are extremely fast. As long as you are not making mistakes, you can write 10,000 pages. The computer can process them in seconds. And so it doesn't matter. Sometimes it is just we, the human beings, who need to be able to organize things and read. And so we try to put things in packages and other things. But you can put any number of lines of code you want. So when we look at our application, we had public class, welcome, and then we had this, another statement here, public static void, and main and all that. So this is what we call the main method. Like I said, method is what are those things that actually perform functions or that do work in Java. So it's like you can create a class called, say, dog, and within that class, a method will be maybe back, because we know dogs back. Now, but within the class called dog, I can have different dogs. So I can name one, Jasper. I can name one, Toby. Those kind of, there are different dogs, but they are all within the same class. And so we have what we call methods. And it is those methods that actually do the action or that do what we see or we get to work in Java. But before you can move on to write any code, there's always the main method. And it's main here because you would see this followed by that. So we call that the main method. So if I go back to my presentation, yeah. So a method in Java is what we call a self-contained block of code that has a name and has a property that is reusable. So the method has a name and it is able to do something. It has a property. So it can be a dog that is going to bark. So the barking is the method. The dog will be the object. We'll talk more about that. And so anything that you see in Java or any name that you see in Java, that is not a Java keyword. A name followed by an open and close parenthesis, then we say that is a method. But we will see more examples of that. So if you see the line written, public static void main, again, public is an access modifier, so it's public. Now static, these are standard names in Java that you automatically see, because what's happening is that when you say static, it means it's stationary. It's just like ordinary English. It doesn't change. Something that is static doesn't move. It doesn't change. And so once it doesn't change, then you can always access it. Because if you change it, then, or if it's possible to change the name of the method or to change the status, then there might be confusion. And so we always make them static. There are some methods you can create and not make it static, but for the main method, it's always static. And then void means it's empty. These are words you will be coming across when we get to methods, and you understand what we mean by void and all that. So, and a method that is empty, we say it doesn't return anything. And so you can ask the method to execute something, but it doesn't need to return anything. So if you look at our code here, we can right away see that println is a method in Java because it follows this. You have an opening and a closing following. And so this tells you that it's a method, but that ends it. The method is void. It doesn't return anything. Some methods, maybe I can write a method that says take 2 and add another number and return the result. So in that case, that method will not be void because it contains something. It's able to return something. Sometimes you can ask the method to just do something without returning it. And so you can have, so I can have example like maybe I can send somebody, I can say Kofi to buy a newspaper. So what it means is that I expect Kofi, that is the object, and then buy, that is the method. So the buy is the action. And then the buy can return something or it wouldn't. So if I say buy newspaper, it means Kofi is going to bring the newspaper back. It's going to return it. So the method that I'm defining cannot be void. But if I say Kofi, okay, take this, the garbage and go and throw away. Now what is happening is that the throw is also a method, but it's not going to return something. The garbage is just tossed out and that ends it. And so the void determines whether the method will return something or it will just work and not return anything. So anytime you come across the word void, we are saying that that method is empty. Now, if we were to remove this, then the method will not return anything. But let's not get too much confused. We will come to understand all. We are going systematically, so we can understand all this. So void means it's empty. So now the main or the word main is actually the name of the method. So all the other things are, defining what the method is, whether it is public, whether it is static, whether it is void, and all that. And now we come to the main, which is the name. So, and it's often written as main, followed by open and close, the parentheses. And that's why I said in Java, anytime you come across a word, especially not a keyword, but a word that is defined, followed by open and close, then we say it's a method. So in this case, the main here is our method that actually executes the program. And so we are saying that not all classes have the main method. Okay. What it means is that I can create a class without a main method. So if I go back to my IDE, so let's see what we are talking about here. Now I'm going back to my morning again, right click, and I go to new class. Now I'm going to call this, my other class. Now look at how I'm doing it, or I'm going to say my empty. Now the moment you put a special character, you realize that Java will highlight, or the ID will highlight, the name is not valid. And so I'm going to say my empty. So once you remain, you are still following the rules, class, okay. So I'm going to create a class. Now, of course, it's public, and so it's highlighted. So by default, this is always highlighted. We ignore these ones, but now you will see that we have this here, which is the main method that we. So I can either check or uncheck it. The public static void main. So if I don't check this, I'm going to create the class without the main method. So if I don't click on this, so I can go ahead and finish it, and then it will create public class, my empty class. It will save it as my empty class .java, but then you realize that there's no main method there. So if you look at this, employee has the main method. My first Java program has the main method. Welcome to Java has the main method. So let me copy this. So if I want to copy, so if I go to employee, .java, and I paste this, so let me just Control V. So now I'm not okay. I'm now saying I am printing out employee. Okay, that's just to show that it is employee class. So if I remove this, and then if I run this, so I go to run, and I say run as Java application, then it runs. I'm printing out employee. Okay, if I come to my empty class, and I paste the same thing. And I say, okay, I'm printing. Okay, I'm printing out empty or whatever. Okay, right away there's an error. No, it tells you that this will not work because you don't have the main method. Because the main method is the file that will execute. Now you're asking the file to go to the system class and then pick this object, which we'll talk about, and then sort of output this onto the screen. If I try to, already it has highlighted it anyway, but if I still try to run, and I go to run, and I say run as, then it will say there's nothing to run, or there's no application. So it's not applicable. So in the sense that a file or a Java class without the main method is not an application, or it's not executable. Normally we just say application or download an application. When you download the application, there are thousands of files. If it's a Java program, thousands of files, but there's one file that is the executable file. And that file must have the main method. And so once this is running, once it starts running, then in fact, most of the time when you download some applications, you can see, or even before you download it, you will download just a simple file, maybe 2 lines, and then that will start running. When it's running, then all what is spelled inside here, it can now be accessing all the other code in all the other files that you've saved. So if you go to if you start an application, all the applications we download, and especially our Android apps, most of them are written in Java. You wouldn't even want to open the source. They won't even allow you to have access to the source code, because these are proprietary things. There's something called open source, which can give you access. But most cases, when you just install your application, all you see is a folder with some files. Now, some of the files you might be able to open, but most of them you can't open it and see anything. But there's always one file that has the main method. And that's the one, when you click on it, that's the one that executes. And when it executes, even though there are other files there that don't have the main method, you can create other things here. So I can have, say, integer, my age. So we have things like this. It's 10. Put a semicolon, and then that is, you don't see any error because I've simply just put a variable here. I'm not asking it to run, and so it's not going to run. But because it's public, if I'm in another class that is running, I can access this. But because this is also public, but we'll come to see more of that eventually. So the only thing that distinguishes an application from a program is the main method. So we always say that the main method is the one that gives you the application, or that makes a program an application. So although we normally use them interchangeably from the layman's point of view, but as a programmer or somebody who understands Java, when we say application, it's actually one file that we are referring to. Now, it doesn't stop the other files from having the main method as well, but you are always running that one particular file that has the main method, and then that can now access all the others, or the others can equally run as well. But you always have, so an application is a file that has the main method. A program or a Java program is a file that can have, so program is a broader term. So once I write Java code and I save it, it's a Java program. But for it to be an application, it should have the main method in it. So we have public, static, void, main, and now within that, we have what we call a string followed by arguments. It's always written as args, which is so this is a general syntax for Java main. I mean, once you're creating a Java file and you want to execute it, this is the default. It's always there. That's why when you are creating it in the IDE will ask whether you want to include it. And so that's the standard. So a string, once you look at it, it means it's a class which has been created in Java. So in this case, it is capital letter, and that's why, so if I also try to create my class, so I go to morning, let me see, weather class, and I give my class name string. Okay, yeah, okay, it will probably work, but because okay, this might work because the string class is in another package, so it will not conflict, So it's acceptable. You can equally create your class called string, but what we are saying here is that string is a class that is already in Java. And then once you use the word string, what it means is that in the program you would want to print out a string of characters. And so a string of characters is what we have in the quotation marks. So if you go back here, so anytime you see, so this is what we call a string of characters or string literal. So it simply prints it out exactly as it is. You realize that I made a mistake here, but Java will not correct this. Java is not going to correct your English. This is just, while Java sees this, what it is doing is that it's going to treat everything literally as it is. So when we say literal, it means it's not going to interpret anything. It's not going to compile or anything. It's just going to print it out exactly as it is. So we call it a string literal. And you can only do this because there's a string class in Java which already defines so many things. Now we're talking about what's happening is that when you write this thing as printed, it looks so easy. But in actual fact, you need to get the computer to do this. What's happening? Computers don't understand English. So things have to be converted to a language that will correspond to the zeros and ones that the computer will understand, and then also work on it and then display it on the screen. So when you go into the string class, there's a whole lot of code that has been written that instructs the machine how to go about the process of printing out string characters. So at the high level, we just only type it in, and Java takes care of the rest. But those who are actually in the development of the Java, they go to the machine level or the operating system level, and then they do the programming. And that's left for the high level engineers and computer scientists. So at the higher end, we just type our regular English, and then Java takes care of the rest. So we have what we call the string literal, and then we have what we call arguments or args are used to hold the strings that might be sent to the main method. Okay, so the arguments, when you create a method, there are always arguments that come with it. And the arguments are actually what is being done. So let me just use Notepad and give a simple example here. So if I write, so assuming that I want to, so I have, okay, Kofi's house. So let me just say Kofi house. So let's say this is a class I've created in Java. I can have dot ama, okay, dot cook. So so when you see this, what we are saying is that this is a class that is in Java, or we have created. Then ama is an object. So within the classes, we have objects. So we'll come to talk about how we create objects in classes. And then we also have a method or a function. So in Java, we call it method. So cook. So here, what I'm doing is that I'm going to Ama's class and I'm asking Ama to cook. Now what follows is just open and close. That is empty. So if you just say Ama go and cook, okay, you haven't given Ama any arguments or any instructions. So Ama can go and cook anything. I can cook rice, you can cook plantain, you can cook whatever because it's empty. But I can put in arguments there. So if I put rice here, and what I'm trying to say is that Ama should cook and then rice, or I can put kenke or whatever. So those are now what we call the arguments. So when you write your method, some methods can take arguments, other methods don't, because or other methods don't need to take arguments. So when I do this, then I'm asking Ama to go and prepare kenke. But even they're still not finished. When I say kenke, how many of them? So I can even go further to add something. So we'll come to talk about multiple arguments. I can say 2 or 3, rather than just kinky. So the same thing in Java. When we have arguments, they go into the into the method. So if you look at the main method, there's the open and close, and then we have what we call string and arguments. So the args here is just telling the compiler that it should be ready to accept strings. So strings will be passed to it, and then it will be asked to print them out. And that's where we now have the here that says system.out println. And once you do this, what's happening is that it's able to do the interpretation and everything and print out exactly what you have asked it to do. Now, if you took this one out, now you're going to have issues because so now if I take the string and I don't add any arguments, now I'm going to have an error because it says it's not complete. The method expects something because for the main method, particularly, it always has to accept some arguments. And so we call this the main method, and it's the one that runs the applications. And then finally, the line that says system.out.println. Of course, system is a class. I've already talked about that. That is created in Java. It's already in there. Because Java comes in several packages. If you try to open it, you'll see it. So java.lang is a package. In fact, our classes are usually created in that package. If I go to here, morning, right click new and class, you see that there's a super class, java.lang.object. So what it means is that these are already folders and subfolders that have been created. So Java is the main folder. Then within that folder, there's a lang, which is another subfolder or a package. And within that, there's object. And now we are creating our classes in that. So that already tells you that there are a whole lot of other folders that we don't tamper with, but they're all part of the Java, and they help you to run the applications or the programs. So the classes we are creating are normally part of what we call a super class. So the super class is there, and now we have the classes. So we say, the system is a class that is within the java.lang. Then out is an object. It's also a keyword in Java. So we create objects out of classes. Again, we'll come to talk of that. And then the println is a method. It's print line. There's print line, and then there's print. We'll see the difference shortly. So like I said, once you write a method, there must always be an open and close. And it can contain arguments or it can be empty. So this explains the 2 lines of code that we have got. I've already talked of this, what we call this, the hello world is a string literal. It is printed exactly as it is. So that's what we call the string literal. And so most of the times I'm saying that you're using the class object method or class.object.method format repeatedly in most things that you do. For you to get Java to work, you always have to go to the class, go to the object, and then get the method. And so the objects use the methods to perform the functions or to perform the activities that we expect. So I can say, take in, ask somebody to type. It's like when you go to an ATM, it's first of all, it's displayed to you, depending on what you select. You can now say, okay, enter your PIN. Now what happens? When you enter the PIN, it's a method that takes that PIN and then takes it and goes to compare with what is stored in the database. And then you can come back and tell you whether, so it's returning something. To return whether you should proceed or to return a reject, tell you that the PIN is not correct and so on. So these are the individual files that handle all this. And that method that does that is within or is being executed by an object. So objects are the ones that use methods. And just like I explained, a class can be dog, the object can be skipper, the dog name, and then the method can be back or bite or eat. and so on. So the methods are the action things. And then, like I said, some can come with arguments and others will not. So I can say dog dot skipper dot back into brackets 2. In that case, I'm asking it to back 2 times. So we are going to say, so rather than talking in, so I can, so if I have a class called dog, I'll say dog dot skipper. Now, mostly the objects are written in lowercase. Now, this is, okay, I wanted to say back. This is open. So this, if you have something like this and you want to execute it, then something has to be put in there because I can't continue backing forever. So I can say back 2. In that case, it will back 2 times and then it stops. So I can make it 3 or 4 or whatever. There can be something else that I will do that probably will not require arguments. But in most cases, there will always be. So there's always class dot object dot method. And then the method. So if you write back without anything, we wouldn't call this a method. Now, so this is not a method. Also bear in mind in Java, you probably come across things like I can say, we will see an example here. So I can say if, for example, A is equal to B, something like that. So you'll be seeing things like this. That doesn't make if a method, because I said methods have always the opening and the closing. It's for the keywords. If you see a keyword followed by this, then it means most probably it's not a method. But generally, anytime you see, especially words that are created by users, so if I see back or eat or other things followed by open and close, then that obviously is a method in Java. So you'll be seeing this sequence of characters or sequence of words repeatedly as we go along. So the last but one is what we call the reserved words. So I've already talked about this. So the Java keywords, class, void, static, all those things are used in Java. So we call them keywords. I've shown the website already, so I don't know. And then the identifiers. So when we hear the word identifier in Java, it's simply what is identifying the class or the method or whatever you are creating. And so it's just a name. So the name you give to something is an identifier. So if I call it dog, then the class is identified as dog. And so identifiers also follow the conventions that we talked about now. So they can have letters and numbers and underscores and so on. They must start with a letter or an underscore or the dollar. So in this case, we're not talking about only classes, but we can have objects which we identify, just like I have a dog and then skipper and other things. All those are what we call identifiers. So, but you will never use Java keywords, for your methods or your objects. Because, so in this case, I can't use, if I go back to my notepad, because what we have abstract as a Java keyword. So I can't do this because I'm giving an object a name, which is already a keyword. And so this, you are going to get an error because it's a reserved word and you can't use it for any purpose. So that's, and of course, we say it can always be of any length. You can put any name that you want. Java will take care of it, so long as you follow the. And then the last but one is what we call the access modifiers, which I've already mentioned. So these are the ones that modify access to your classes and objects and other things. So when we say modify, we mean they can change. So you can change the class from public to private or public to protected. So we are modifying access. That's why we call them access modifiers. But they're just 4 that we'll be coming across. In fact, most of the time we're going to be using public because the others are more advanced kind of programming. But the moment you say public, that is fine. You understand what it is. If you wake up one morning and you are told that, oh, the mall Accra Mall is now private. We have modified access to the mall. If it's now private, it means there's a gate which is closed or which is not accessible to the public. Probably you need to go through a whole lot of things before you can get in there. So you can also change from private to public, in which case you have modified the access. You can also change to protected, but these have meanings in Java. So protected and then default, they mean something. We'll see that shortly. But these are the keywords. I mean, yeah, the words that we use, we call them access modifiers. In most cases, because we're writing programs that we want to execute and then maybe access other classes and other things, we use public most of the time or almost all the time. So classes can use public and default as the access modifiers. You can also use protected, and then but it's going to create problems for you if you start writing more and more code. So I've already said when you set to public, of course, it's available. When you set it to default, now what it means is that the given class will only be accessible to classes which are defined within the same package. So what it means is that if I don't make it public but I make it default, then it's only in the package that I've defined it that so this package morning, all the files here can access code from each other. So long as they are public or default. Now, if I go to another package, afternoon, for example, there are files in there. If I make the afternoon, not the afternoon. If I make the class here private or default, what it means is that classes in another folder cannot access. So public, they're all accessible. It's just like having a compound house, and then within maybe a village or something. So what's happening is that the village might be public or the area might be public. You can come in, but the compound house is only limited to those who are within. And if you are within the house, that's all those who are within the morning. You can enter each other's rooms and so on. So you can access all the classes that are within that package. But once they are set to default, you cannot access, so you cannot go to another compound house and access the rooms. But if it's public, then everything is accessible. And that's why we always use public most of the time, because it makes things easier. In that case, you can write code and save as several files. So something like this, all this can be part of one application or one program that you are running, but they are separate files. And so you put them all as public, because you never know. There might be a point you would want to write something here. Now, there's no point in repeating things, and that's one beauty about computers, and also maybe the object-oriented programming too. You just write the thing once, and have it saved. Anytime you want, you don't repeat it in another file, but you just say that, oh, it's already in there, so go there and pick it, or go there and fetch it. And it has to be public. If it were not public, you wouldn't be able to do that. So, and that's why, even though there are access modifiers, we always use the public as the general one or the default one to use. Now, the final one I've already talked about is system.out.println, and then it just simply prints out this, and then we have what we call a statement. So in Java, everything or statements end with semicolon, and so somebody's calling me, send a message. Okay, yeah. So without a semicolon, then it is not a statement. So anytime we come across a statement in Java, it always ends in a semicolon. So something like this, and we say what is a statement. All these other things, of course, are comments. Now I can quickly just show the difference between. So here, if I were to use, so let me copy this, and then I just paste, and then change the, okay. So I'm saying welcome to Java. Okay, Java is very interesting. Okay, and then Java is easy to learn. So these are Java is easy to learn. So easy to learn. Okay. So here we are. We have. So if I print out these three, so let me remove this first, which is not. So I go to run. As a run as application. Now it prints them out. Welcome to Java. Java is very interesting. Java is easy to learn because I'm printing them this by this. Now, if I change this print ln to print, or print line to print, it's still a method in Java, but it's not the same as print ln or print line. Now, if I run this, this is what you will see. So, no, if I run this, because I'm using print, what it has done is that it's printing everything, on the same line. It is not separating them. So the print line or the print ln will print and then move the cursor to the next level. So it will print hello world. So if I do this, so print ln, where is it? ln, yeah. No, I wanted to, okay, fine. So let me leave it like this. So because this is print, it will print the hello world, and then when it ends, the cursor will stay there. So let me run this so that we can see what we're talking about. Take this off. Then I run this. Run as application. And so we can see that because I use print, when it did hello world, welcome to Java, it didn't move to the next line. It just continued. Java is very interesting. But because this is print ln, when it finished printing, the Java is very interesting. It moved to the next line, and so it printed the Java. It's easy to learn. So the print and the print line, there's a difference. The difference is that when you write print, you are just printing a line, and once you are done, the cursor stays at the end after it has printed. So when it comes across printing again, it's just going to continue. But if you say print ln, when it ends the printing, it moves the cursor down to the next level. And so the next time it encounters print, then it will leave a line or it will move on to the next line. And so that distinguishes between. So they are both methods, but if you are just printing a short thing, you can use print. But if you want to use, you want to have different lines, just like we've shown here, then we use print ln or print line. So that's basically the difference between the print and the print ln. Okay, so the last one is what we call blocks. So the blocks are defined by the braces. So a brace is the opening, that's the curly brace, and then the ending is the opposite. So you open and then you end. So each has a block, or each one is a block. So when you open, so here we have what we call a class block. So if I go to, let me annotate this. Yeah, so if I start with my public class, this already tells you that the word test here is a class test, it's a class, starts with an uppercase letter. So in that case, you can clearly see that it's a class. And then it opens, and then it goes all the way to close. So we call this a class block. So whatever is within is the body of the class, and that's a block. Then we have the main method, which also opens, and then it closes. So you can see that when you open one after the other, then that should close before the other one. I've already talked about that. And then we have some statements here. Okay, so let's not worry about this. We'll come to talk about this eventually. So we realize that we've opened 1, 2, 3, and so we close 3, 2, and 1. So it's just the opposite. So the way now, we don't need to worry about this because these days the IDE takes care of all this. Now you realize that ever since I started writing this thing, I've not typed an opening, like that. When you try to do this, the IDE tries to create an opening, and then so once I've tried to type this to open here, it automatically will close the other one and then open here. So I probably will need to close. Now, of course, we'll be typing them eventually. But when you're creating your classes and your methods and other things, objects, no, not objects, classes, the IDE will automatically put them in. But there's always an open and a close, and they come as blocks. So we have the class block, and we said nothing can come after you finish the class. For the method, of course, you can have other things after the method, the main method. It's just that it will not run. So I can have something written here, but it will not run as part of the application. So this is what will run. If you decide to print, put something outside here, it might not give an error. So if I put integer age is 10, oh, now even if I'm going to do this, let's see. What's happening is, okay, yeah. So in this case, because it's a Java syntax and it's correct, it's not an error, but it's not within the main method. So it's not going to be executed as part of it's going to be ignored. And so you can have things like that, but in most cases, what we write will be within the main method. So we have these coming as blocks. So to wrap up what we've been talking about this morning, we said everything we use in a Java program must be part of a class. So you cannot just start writing a Java application and you expect it to run. It has to be within a class. So we always say public class this before we start. Now the class name, we've already talked about the name, can begin with an uppercase, or it must begin with an uppercase letter, an underscore, or the $sign. Now, like I said, the $sign these days is even being discouraged. So a class name cannot be a Java keyword, obviously. You can use not even only class names, all other names you give in Java cannot be Java keywords. So, and then every Java application must contain the main method. So remember, application. So application is different from program or software. Sometimes we just mix them, but software is a general term, or program is a general term. For application, it's actually the file that runs. But then, of course, it's a program anyway, so we can use them interchangeably. A method is usually written as a name followed by the open and close. So once you see that, that is a method in Java. Then we have what we call identifiers. That's the names that we give. And most of the time, we try to make the identifiers meaningful. So they should mean something. If I'm writing a Java file that will contain maybe my school fees or my whatever, or like I have my church, I want to have collections, then that name you give should have meaning, so that if I look at it later or another person looks at it, it should have meaning. So I can say public class, my school, or public class, my courses, and other things. But you don't just say public class X or public class program. No, those don't carry any meaning. And so programmers, it's always better to actually, and the same thing with variables and all that. They need to have meaning and not just X. Sometimes when we're teaching, we use this just for illustration. But in actual programming, we don't use X or Y or those things. And then we have what we call the access modifiers, which are the keywords. Reserved words that we use to modify access to our classes and then objects and so on. So public, private, default, and those things are the access modifiers. But like I said, we're going to be using mostly public all the time because we want all the things we create to be publicly accessible. And so we'll be using public in most of our classes and our objects and other things. Okay, so this brings us to this was, I was going to go to, so this is the end of this presentation. And so questions or comments? And then let me end there.